Good morning. The hearing of the Select Committee on Economic Disparity and Fairness and Growth will come to order. I'm Chairman Jim Himes, and I'm just delighted to bring this hearing to order. And I want to start with a very big thank you, first to my colleague Vicente Gonzalez, who really conceived of the importance of this hearing, to the many, many elected officials, too numerous to name, that have shown us around all morning. And boy, have we gotten a quick but comprehensive tour of the region, its assets, its liabilities, its challenges, its strengths. I really want to thank you. I know you're very, very busy, and we're very grateful for your attention to this. And I really want to thank the members who have joined us here today. This is actually the biggest attendance we've had at a field hearing, and as chairman, I've made it an imperative of this committee that we do hearings outside of Washington so that we can actually see the challenges and problems that we're trying to address when we do our work inside the Beltway. I'm going to give the bulk of my time to Mr. Gonzalez before we go to the ranking member. But I want to, since we have a great audience here today, I just really want to emphasize what it is that we're doing here. As I said, we're here primarily to listen. That's an unnatural act for elected officials, especially of our variety. But honestly, we can't do the work that we need to do in Washington without getting the thoughts and experience of people on the ground. This committee has a very simple charge. The Speaker of the House asked us to look at the disparity, the economic disparity that exists in this country and that exists all over the country. In my very affluent county of Fairfield in Connecticut, we have enormous wealth side by side with immense challenges and poverty. And what's remarkable about that challenge in this country is that it is not blue or red, it's not rural or urban, it is everywhere. And I know that regardless of our political ideology, we think that that's not quite right. We believe as Americans that every American, regardless of the zip code, the color of their skin, where they're born, what language they speak, they should have the opportunity to partake in the American dream. Thank you. I am going to ask that we limit that kind of audience participation, positive or negative, just because really this is about conveying information. And I will just say, just in the couple of hours that we've been running around today, I've learned a heck of a lot. Just to throw some things out here, infrastructure. This is, unlike some other places we've visited, a growing population and growing economy. I learned today that much of the fresh produce that comes into the United States comes across one bridge, that you drive a very long way to get to an interstate. That is constrained growth and prosperity, and something the federal government needs to think about and work with all of you to address. I learned, because we toured a couple of the colonias, that there are people living here without adequate access to sanitation and fresh water. Without that, you start behind in trying to achieve the American dream, and that's something that all of us who have public charges should be thinking about addressing. And we've also learned, and this will make my Republican colleagues particularly attentive, an immense amount of resources have come down to areas like this, but necessarily with multiple levels of government, there have been rigidities and friction, bureaucracy and administration that sometimes results in money not getting to where it needs to go, and often results in money and resources not getting to those communities who need it most. So we're going to take notes, as my ranking member Brian Stile will tell you, as chairman, I have endeavored to make this very bipartisan, not because we enjoy being bipartisan, but we do, but because with the configuration in Washington, unless something has support from both parties, it's just not happening. And so we're particularly interested, my Democratic colleagues, my Republican colleagues, in finding those areas where we can find agreement, even if they're small, in order to try to address and be a better partner to all of the wonderful people in this region. So again, thank you to all of you who have hosted us so well this morning. And with that, let me yield some time to the representative of this area, Mr. Vicente Gonzalez.
Thank you so much. I want to thank the audience and the witnesses for being here. Obviously, it's a very important select committee that was put together to address the disparity in growth. As we now are investing trillions of dollars of infrastructure funding, I thought it was imperative that this committee came down here in person and saw the challenges that we face every single day. We're still the largest urban community in the United States that's not connected to an interstate highway. We still have drainage issues. We have major drainage issues, and we have a digital divide that is like no other in the country. So I want to thank Chairman Himes. I'm grateful to you and Ranking Member Stile for giving me this opportunity to show you this beautiful part of the country and an opportunity to hold a formal hearing on some critical issues that impact our community here. I'd also like to thank the witnesses and everyone who's participating. It means a lot to me to be able to have so many members of Congress to travel to South Texas to discuss issues that impact us. As we know, infrastructure is important across our country, but in South Texas, our rapid growth makes it critical that our investments keep up with the population boom. And as someone said, we are victims of our own success, and it's a challenge, and we need to get everyone's attention in Washington and Austin and across the country. South Texas is young, both in age and the age of our community and its growth as a major metropolitan area. South Texas, as you know, almost 100 years ago, this region was nearly empty, described as a desert by some. Since then, the valley has grown tremendously. With the introduction of irrigation in the early 1900s, we became an agriculture hub. In 1930, all 4 counties that comprised the Rio Grande Valley only had 176,000 people. That combined population grew to 320,000 by 50, thanks to agriculture expansion. And in 1980, the valley's population was a little over 500,000. By 1990, it was over 700,000, and today we're at about 1.5 million people. So down here, the median age is 29 years old. So we have a great young population that's 10 years younger than the median age in the rest of the country. To ensure we continue to thrive and prosper, our growth must be met with congruent investments in our infrastructure. Many of our communities are rapidly developing into cities and towns, but our infrastructure has not consistently met the needs of our growth. Prior to this hearing, we heard witnesses about the consequences of limited federal support, which we intend to address today. Unincorporated communities like colonias are in conditions many would not expect to see in this country, and American citizens living in third world conditions. And as severe natural disasters become more common, it's become increasingly regular for neighborhoods that we've seen today in expressways and whole communities to flood on a regular basis. The COVID-19 pandemic exposed some of the ramifications of underdeveloped broadband infrastructure. Without access to reliable broadband, our young people could not receive a quality education they deserve, and our workforce could not meet 21st century needs. My colleagues in Congress understand it is our duty as leaders to secure the prosperity of our future that our constituents deserve. And I hope through this trip to South Texas, we can make that message clear. Ensuring proper investment in our infrastructure is the least we can do to give our growing communities a chance to achieve the American dream. We're home to some of the hardest working people in the country. South Texans continue to show their strength and resilience in the face of flooding, deteriorating roads, substandard and limited housing, and lack of broadband. Oftentimes, floods force people and entire families to start over and over and over again. Disparate water access and storage is a huge issue for us. In an effort to gain access to water, many Colonia residents share a garden hose, an extension cord between multiple trailers. What if we had the resources to utilize water from heavy rains, recapture it, repurpose it for our communities and farmers and ranchers? Now, the community will hear from a panel of esteemed speakers about the challenges and opportunities emerging from our region. Our region, like many others across the nation, has become more urban and requires the infrastructure investment necessary to grow. We're going to hear that our community, like so many other growing communities, struggle to compete for federal funding against the larger, more established metropolitan areas. And also, we were talking about some of the rules that are made in Washington that don't get the monies down to the folks who need it most. It's my goal today, through this hearing, that we make it clear that even though we're no longer rural, it's not easy to compete with still far larger metropolitan areas. But I think many of us can agree that it's growing communities like ours in South Texas where the next chapter of our nation will be born. And it's imperative that we have the federal governments engaged and support to realize our full potential. If we do that, the people of our communities will prosper. And when people prosper in our nation, we all prosper. And as I like to say, when we all do well, we all do well.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. With that, I recognize the ranking member for an opening statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for bringing us here, and thank you, Mr. Gonzalez, for bringing us to your home community.
Thank you.
One of the things that I truly cherish about this committee is the opportunity to get outside the D.C. swamp and to listen to people, although I will note it is hot and humid in South Texas, and it is about 80 degrees and beautiful in Wisconsin today. But that being said, flooding has had a significant impact on the Rio Grande Valley. This committee had an opportunity to see some of that firsthand today in the committee's visit to the colonias. And I think we should really explore how the federal government can partner with local areas to meet this need. Flood infrastructure costs millions of dollars. But instead, what's so frustrating when I hear from folks here is that the federal government and local resources are being needed to address a different crisis. And that's the porous border costing the state of Texas and cities across the Rio Grande Valley millions of dollars each year. We'll hear in the video that there's schools in this region who are building barriers to protect students from high-speed car chases with drug cartels. City attorneys are having to double their staffs to keep up with the pace of their work. American cities are struggling every day because the federal government, led by President Biden, refuses to do the job and secure the border. The border crisis numbers are staggering. Since President Biden became president, 2.8 million illegal border counters have occurred. That's 3 times the population of the state of Delaware. And it includes 3,600 unaccompanied minors. That's 50 yellow school buses of children without their parents making a perilous journey across the U.S.-Mexico border. And sadly, many of these children are victims of human trafficking. These traffickers often abuse females, and in particular, some of these young girls. Our law enforcement at the border is being stretched thin because the Biden administration refuses to take action, and it's having very deadly consequences. Drug cartels are taking advantage of Biden's open border policies to smuggle poisonous, illegal fentanyl across the border for distribution in every city in the United States of America. Since Biden took office, DHS has seized 13,000 pounds of fentanyl. That's roughly 3 billion fatal doses. In Racine County in Wisconsin, one county in Wisconsin, last year, 68 people died from illicit fentanyl overdose deaths. Thousands across this country. And that's the fentanyl we're able to catch, the 3 billion doses. Americans keep dying because cartels are making billions of dollars on human trafficking and drug trafficking because the Biden administration refuses to step up and secure the border. What the Biden administration has done to secure the border that is just 10 miles away from where we sit today. Let's review. On day one, President Biden canceled border wall construction and is currently paying contractors to sit on $350 million worth of wall material. The $1.9 trillion inflation-inducing stimulus plan passed at the beginning of the Biden administration included $0 to secure the U.S.-Mexican border. The $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill that was passed included $0 to secure the U.S.-Mexico border. And to make things worse, the Biden administration's own budget slashed DHS funding, Department of Homeland Security, by $800 million. President Biden and Border Czar Harris, I think, should come to the Rio Grande Valley to see the real-world impacts that their decisions are having on the communities here in South Texas. It has to stop. The Biden administration is working to make it worse. They want to end Title 42. According to the Biden administration's own accounting, if Title 42 were to end, we would see an increase in crossings to 18,000 individuals today. And think about how much more challenging life would be for folks here in the Rio Grande Valley if that were to happen. Towns should be focusing their resources on the needs of the community, of flooding and other areas that we've heard today, areas of need that this committee saw at the colonias earlier. But instead, we're seeing communities here in South Texas using local funds to address what should be a federal issue, and that's securing the U.S.-Mexico border. The failure of the federal government to deal with this problem is a detriment to cities across South Texas. Today, every town in America is facing problems stemming from a porous border. But border towns are bearing the brunt of the cost. It's impacting the ability of towns to afford long-term infrastructure projects. And inaction by the Biden administration is pushing Texans to pay for a federal issue. This hearing, I believe, is the first congressional hearing at the border since President Biden took office. The inaction of the president's causing pain across the border. This is a problem that President Biden and Border Czar Harris in Washington simply cannot continue to ignore. The problems this committee saw today and the problems are solvable if the federal government does its job. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Before I turn to our witnesses, I ask unanimous consent for members to play a video from Everyday Americans. Just for the people who are here today, in an effort again to hear from people struggling with the challenges we're here to address, we do 4 minutes of testimony from non-experts, but people who are living this. So with unanimous consent, we'll please roll the video.
I'm Sergio Contreras, proud father of two. I live in Mission, Texas. I work as CEO of Atlas Hall and Rodriguez, also a board member of the Rio Grande Valley Partnership.
My name is Fonda Diaz. I live in Progreso, Texas. Right now, I'm a full-time student at UTRGV.
There are certain parts of our communities in the valley and across the state where there's gaps where we need additional investment to be able to access reliable and adequate broadband speed to be able to fulfill what is needed to attain an education or complete your work or for telemedicine.
The little town where I live, small population, we have satellite internet, so it's very slow. My Zoom meetings were always getting disconnected. Sometimes I even spend extra time at the campus because I know once I get home, I'm really not going to be able to, do anything online.
We're fortunate there's the Broadband Development Office Board of Advisors, which provides the opportunity to create a plan for the state of Texas with a charge to ensure that we continue to showcase the strength of Texas, providing another tool for economic development. Just like we need infrastructure for transportation, roadways, we're also needing the investment and for broadband to catch up.
My mom not being able to have that Wi-Fi or, that broadband at home, I'm not able to communicate with her via FaceTime. And it kind of makes it difficult, because of the connection. It's not there. It's hard sometimes, so having broadband will be a great way to stay connected with my family.
Thank you to Congressman Gonzalez for bringing this hearing here to our region. It's very important that funding from the bipartisan infrastructure law comes to Texas, impacts our local communities here in the Rio Grande Valley, as we've heard from Rhonda. It would transform lives. It'll provide opportunities for this generation and the next.
My office is very small. Whenever I took office, I had one secretary, and that's it, me and a secretary. But under Operation Lone Star in Texas, that has now since grown with grant funding. I've hired several assistants. In fact, I have National Guard paralegals in the office now helping me process all the paperwork. One of the things we were going to fund was like a splash park or a splash pad, like a water park near the city park. But now instead of using the funds for that, we've used it for emergency shelters for the county to have. in case, we have high-speed chases or anything like that. So the funding for the county is drastically affected by law enforcement as well. I don't think if I had to remember back before this crisis started, we might have like 2 or 3 high-speed chases a year in this county. Now, literally last weekend, we had 10. So, I don't know what the percentage of that is, but having 10 in one weekend versus you would have 2 or 3 per year before, it's astronomical. The changes it's made is astronomical. Driving on the highways around here, you never know when the high-speed chase is going to occur. So you have to drive, very defensively. Our school campus is now militarized with rock boulders that surround the campus to prevent cars from high-speed car chases from actually entering campus and injuring children. So that's something we've had to deal with.
Okay, we turn now and welcome the testimony of our witnesses. Brief introduction. First, we have the Honorable Eddie Treviño, Cameron County Judge. Next, we'll hear from the Honorable David Fuentes, Hidalgo County Commissioner representing Precinct 3. Next, we have the Honorable David Garza, Cameron County Commissioner representing Precinct 1. We will then hear from Ms. Jordana Barton Garcia, Chief Executive Officer of Barton Garcia Advisors. And finally, we have Ms. Susan Kibby, Executive Director of the South Texas Property Rights Association. Witnesses are reminded that their oral testimony will be limited to 5 minutes. You should be able to see a timer in front of you that will indicate how much time you have left. I would ask that you be mindful of the timer, and when your timer reaches 0, to quickly wrap up your testimony so that we can be respectful of the other witnesses and the members' time. Without objection, your written statement will be made part of the record. I also, just because we have a number of members who I know need to catch flights, I'm going to be a little bit strict on the gavel here, maybe more so than usual. So just members, I'll let your witnesses answer questions that go over the time limit, but let's not start questions after the time limit. With that, Judge Treviño, you are now recognized for 5 minutes to give an oral presentation of your testimony.
Good morning. Chairman Himes, to the esteemed members of the House Select Committee, we want to welcome you to the Rio Grande Valley, and in particular, on behalf of Cameron County, welcome. Cameron County is part of the 4-county Rio Grande Valley, and to say that Cameron County is unique would be an understatement. Where else in the U.S. would you find a county with an international border, a coastal border, and 6 modes of transportation: air, sea, rail, highway, pipeline, and space? Cameron County is truly one of a kind. Let me take the members back to September the 15th, 2001. I think all of us will recall the mood of the country and the tension that we felt. In the early mornings of September the 15th, just 4 days after 9/11, a barge struck a support column at the Queen Isabella Causeway at South Padre Island, where 8 people died as a result of their fall into the Laguna Madre. Was this part of 9/11? Was this part of the terrorist attack? We didn't know. But we realized and already knew at that point that a second causeway was needed. That was the only connection between the South Padre Island and the mainland. 20 years later, we still only have one causeway connecting South Padre Island. For approximately 60 days, residents of South Padre Island were landlocked and had to take boats or ferries in order to cross or get the essentials in order to live. Many businesses lost and were never able to recover and close as a result. For an economically disadvantaged region, we cannot let this happen again. We need a second causeway to South Padre Island. Cameron County, South Padre Island, and the Cameron County Regional Mobility Authority have each committed $1 million in order to get the environmental assessments accomplished. But we need the federal government's help to assist the CCRMA in working with U.S. Fish and Wildlife so that we can both agree on mitigation plans for the extremely critical second causeway. We need to be able to meet with U.S. Fish to meet, discuss, and agree on the mitigation plans. The second access to South Padre Island will involve a second crossing and allow a much-needed alternate route from the island to the mainland. It would also facilitate evacuation in times of hurricane or natural other disaster. We are always in the hurricane path on a yearly basis. This project has an approximate cost of $450 million. TxDOT is the reviewing agency on the environmental document. We are looking to partner with the state of Texas and the federal government for funding opportunities. Second project I want to mention in Cameron County is the East Loop project. The reliance upon international commerce is significant. In 2021, despite the restrictions on international travel, the county bridge system, Cameron County, tallied over 3.5 million international crossings. The Port of Brownsville, which is a main economic engine for the valley, there are also 270 businesses that alone would benefit from completion of the East Loop project, which would connect Veterans International Bridge with the Port of Brownsville and allow an overweight corridor. This, along with the causeway, are our two major projects in Cameron County. Again, we need help with U.S. Fish and Wildlife to complete a land swap and approval of a mitigation plan. The third project I want to mention is here in Hidalgo County, the IBTC corridor, the International Bridge Trade Corridor, which would allow and improve local and regional mobility for transporting persons and goods from international ports of entry in the area between US 281 and FM 493. Again, the lack of an interstate hinders the ability to move our infrastructure, to move our produce and our products throughout the country. This project will obviously increase commerce and international trade. I want to mention, boy, 5 minutes go fast, that in Cameron County, we've committed over $500 million in projects leveraging $50 million of local money into over $500 million state and federal funds. We've eliminated ad-grade crossings, and we've opened the first rail bridge in over 100 years between U.S. and Mexico. We have utilized the TxDOT pass-through program, and we've also taken advantage of the federal donation acceptance program. We have two programs at the Veterans International Bridge, one for $15 million to increase the commercial primary lanes, and also we will start construction on the increasing of the commercial lanes. We also have a DAP project at the Free Trade Bridge at Los Indios, which will allow southbound transmigrante and commercial traffic going into Mexico inspections on dual side. We also want to make sure that we protect our natural treasures, including Laguna Atascosa, National Wildlife Refuge, Bahia Grande, and the Lower RGV National Wildlife Refuge, along with the Palo Alto Battlefield National Historic Park, and most importantly, our South Padre Island National Seashore. I see that I'm running out of time, but 2 years ago, the three MPOs, Metropolitan Planning Organizations of the Valley, merged in order to merge, having one RGV MPO. We are in the process of committing resources, and we are asking for your assistance. In Cameron County alone, we have over $2 billion of projects planned. 180 million are shovel-ready, 320 are under design, and 1.6 are in the planning phase. Again, we need the federal government's assistance to make us, to reach us to the point where we need the infrastructure to meet the needs here in the Valley. Wow, right on time.
Thank you. Thank you, Judge Treviño. Commissioner Fuentes, you're now recognized.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is David Fuentes, and I currently serve as the Hidalgo County Commissioner for Precinct 1. I also serve as a board member of Hidalgo County Drainage District Number 1. First of all, I would like to acknowledge this historic Rio Grande Valley field hearing of the U.S. House Select Committee on Economic Disparity and Fairness and Growth. I would also like to thank Congressman Vicente Gonzalez in representing our region in a remarkable way, and I would also like to commend Chairman Jim Himes, Ranking Member Brian Stile, all of the members of the committee and their staffs for scheduling this critical field hearing in the Rio Grande Valley. As a background, Hidalgo County is the 7th largest county by population out of the 254 counties in the state of Texas, with an approximate population of 1 million people. Today I come to you to talk about our most critical issue, which is flooding. Flooding in Hidalgo County can be attributed to many reasons: insufficient drainage systems, rapid urbanization, low permeability of soils, a flat topography, high poverty levels, among other critical factors. But the bottom line is that when it rains in Hidalgo County, water stagnates and floods our neighborhoods, our businesses, and our infrastructure, creating devastation in our community. The only solution to flooding is to build flood control infrastructure. Over the last 15 years, Hidalgo County Drainage District Number 1, which is in charge of the county's regional flood control systems, has invested $374 million in local bond monies to create flood control infrastructure. However, that is not enough. In 2012, S&B Infrastructure performed a comprehensive study of the necessary drainage improvements needed in the Rio Grande Valley. That study found that $4 billion in drainage improvements are needed in our region, and that was at 2012 prices. Over the last 6 years, Hidalgo County has had 6 FEMA disaster declarations due to flooding, and these were listed in your written testimony. In 2018, we suffered 34 inches of rain in Hidalgo County over 2 days. We endured one of the largest rain events in the United States in 2018, and ironically, this hearing is held almost 4 years to the day from when we experienced that horrific event. After the 2018 rain event, we had received little to no federal assistance. FEMA told us that due to a reinterpretation of their rules, Hidalgo County would not be eligible for public assistance. Actually, all of us in the Rio Grande Valley would not qualify for public assistance. We're here to request a more equitable distribution of that federal funding. One example of real-life devastation in our precinct is Roosevelt Elementary of Weslaco ISD. After 3 different flooding events, the school had to be permanently shut down and the students had to be relocated to other schools. Weslaco ISD also lost their entire bus fleet in 2018, and it cost them over $4 million to replace. In another example, during the rain event of 2018, my staff and I assisted in evacuating many residents, including children, the elderly, and many needing medical assistance using high-profile vehicles and boats. Based on our experience, we have found that many of the federal funding opportunities available to Hidalgo County have inequitable rules and criteria that make it extremely difficult, if not impossible, for us to obtain federal funding for infrastructure and particularly for mitigation. We are requesting that the rules and criteria of new and existing federal funding programs be modified to create a more equitable distribution of federal funds. We provided over half a dozen examples in our written testimony, but I would like to focus on one specific example of disparity. HUD issued $4.2 billion in funding for several rain events in Texas from 2015, 2016, and 2017 through CDBG MIT programs. During this period, Hidalgo County underwent 3 FEMA disaster declarations. Although Hidalgo County was listed in the Federal Register as one of the most impacted and distressed areas in Texas, it only received $25 million in CDBG MIT. The remainder of the funds, approximately $4.1 billion, went to Hurricane Harvey affected areas. This means that Harris County and a handful of other regions obtained 168 times more funding than the Rio Grande Valley. Was that because they had 168 times more population or 168 times more rainwater? 168 times more funding than we received. That is a huge disparity. In closing, the only solution to stop flooding is to create robust flood control infrastructure. What we ask from you today is funding for the Raymondville Drain, the largest and most comprehensive flood control project in Hidalgo County and all of South Texas. Under the terms of existing federal legislation under the Water Resource Development Act, the federal government has a 75% funding agreement with the Hidalgo County Drainage District Number 1, which will fund the remaining 25% of the project cost. We need a congressional allocation of approximately $325 million from the federal government and the creation of a team within the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers that will be tasked with assisting Hidalgo County Drainage District Number 1 by reviewing our environmental, design, and construction documents to bring this game-changing project to reality. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Fuentes. Commissioner Garza, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, sir. Chairman Himes, distinguished members of the committee, my name is David A. Garza, Cameron County Commissioner, Precinct 3. I have served in this position since January 1st of 2001. I'm also a small business owner that has owned and operated an independent pharmacy for the last 42 years. So ranking member style, I know about the issues of drug overdose and things of that sort that occur in this world that we live in, and very cognizant of the impact of families that they can cause. But doing all of that, I still try to find time to improve the quality of life and create better opportunities for the local constituency. The lessons I've learned as a public servant have been that I can do little as one, but I can do a lot when I collaborate with my fellow local leaders in creating a vision for where we would like to be, especially for the regional area of the Rio Grande Valley. I have served on the TxDOT I-69 Advisory Committee. I have served on the I-69 Alliance Group, an advocacy group for I-69 projects. I have served on the local MPO and many other groups wanting to improve our local and state highway systems. I-69 is a 1,600-mile-long highway system that traverses 8 states from Texas to Michigan. It was congressionally designated as a corridor. It connects Mexico to Canada, and it's a major corridor for good movements to occur. Texas is the gateway for U.S.-Mexico trade. In 2020, 65% of all the goods coming in from Mexico to the U.S. went through Texas. Recognizing the importance of high-quality transportation is a necessity for our area to be able to compete nationally for industry and jobs, this has become a priority for us. Interstate highways are at the top of the site selection factors to attract new industry to an area. But I do not want to spend more time telling you that the lack of federal investment on our interstate system in the valley has put us at a big disadvantage. I want to rather tell you what we have done and continue to do to help us partner with federal and state agencies to continue the progress that we've done. We believe that we at the local level put skin in the game. We want to be connected to major interstates north of us. The following is a result of what Texans along this route can do working together. Texas, by TxDOT, in 2013 dedicated $742 million for I-69. In 2018, the amount went up to $3.7 billion from TxDOT. In the current plan that is being proposed to be adopted soon, there is $7.7 billion to be used on I-69 corridor. And at the local level, we have started using innovative financial tools to help us partner with TxDOT to make projects come to fruition. Our counties locally have created regional mobility authorities, have encouraged our legislators to pass statutes that allow us to add a road and bridge user fee to all our licensed vehicles registered in our counties, to develop transportation reinvestment zones, to build toll roads to get projects done, and do other collaborative efforts to make sure that we can build projects out to their fruition. Cameron County and the Rio Grande Valley are the largest metropolitan area in the United States without interstate connectivity. A completed interstate will complement what we have done here in the valley, connecting us from international seaports, land ports of entry to help develop projects such as SpaceX and LNG projects. We look forward to being considered for $600 million to fully fund what would connect us to the interstate highway to the rest of the state of Texas on US 77. Many times our projects don't compete because the grant funding is measured on the same metrics as urban projects are. It's hard to compete with areas that have had an interstate for the last 40 to 50 years. And when you use the same metrics to issue that grant, we don't do well. Many of these areas go through rural Texas, We need to revise the criteria. The 90% match that used to exist to build interstates from the federal government is no longer available. Broadband connectivity, as has been already noted, is critically important. 30% of the households in our county do not have access to internet. 20% have minimal access that don't meet the minimum standards. We have done some projects that have made huge differences in people's lives. Last night I had a conversation with Robert Rodriguez in Lozano, Texas, a small rural colonia with 250 homes in it. And he says to me, Heidi and Zoe can connect to their teachers, can connect to their schools, and can connect to a world outside of local TV antenna. When they went virtual, they couldn't connect because cell phone connectivity is sparse there also. I want to tell you before I lose all my time that I've included, in the spirit of bipartisanism, I've included a package that includes a picture and a DVD of a project that was developed through bipartisan efforts over the course of the last 20 years. The largest wetland restoration project in the United States has come to fruition and exists in the valley. There's a documentary in that package that you will get before you leave. And there's also a picture by an artist that has since passed that wanted us to use her pictures with people to help them see the eyes of who we really are in South Texas through what she saw in the beauty that we had. I thank you for your time. I wish you luck in the endeavors that you have before you. But most importantly, know that we are ready to put skin in the game to make things happen in this region. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Garza. Ms. Barton Garcia, you're now recognized.
Thank you, Chairman Himes, and esteemed members of the committee, as well as Congressman Gonzalez. Thank you for the opportunity to come before you and share information about the Texas border colonias and the unprecedented opportunity to deploy fiber-based broadband to the South Texas region to attract industry, create jobs, improve health outcomes, and transform the economy. I'm Jordana Barton, and I am from the colonia of Benavides in South Texas. My career path has taken me from public education to Latino studies in higher education to nonprofit community development and microfinance to banking, to the Federal Reserve, and to the leadership of a major health system philanthropy serving South Texas. I am currently the owner of a small business, a social enterprise, Barton Garcia Advisors, and senior fellow with Connect Humanity. I am working with many stakeholders to advance the deployment of broadband infrastructure and digital inclusion programs to transform the economy of the South Texas Triangle region. While at the Federal Reserve, I authored Las Colonias in the 21st Century, Progress Along the Texas-Mexico Border, and several publications that came upon its heels regarding closing the digital divide and preparing people for the expanding digital economy. So it was actually the people of the Texas border colonias who brought the attention of the digital divide and the digital economy, indeed, to the Federal Reserve Bank of the United States. It was their stories that told us how significant it was. I learned about the homework gap from families in the colonias before I knew it was called the homework gap. And I learned about the impact of the digital divide on workforce opportunities, even being able to partake in workforce opportunities and having the skills as well to be able to fill the jobs that we currently have. Growing up in a colonia, my brother, he dropped out of high school. There were very low expectations for the children. He dropped out of high school. He worked some middle skills jobs. Those are jobs that don't require a college degree, but they were opportunities for him to get his life together and figure out what he was going to do. He got his GED, went to community college, went to university, and then went to medical school. He became a surgeon and served in Iraq and Afghanistan as well with the Air Force Guard, incredibly serving his community every day, bilingual surgeon. He was a dropout. We could have lost him if we didn't have those pathways into the middle class that we had in our generation. We had ways in. We could fill those middle skills jobs and put ourselves through college and have a career. And indeed, the millions of dollars in taxes that he and the rest of our siblings have paid, even if you're just looking at that stark number, is incredible, right? And plus the giving back, to our community. So that's who's in the Texas border colonias. It might look confusing because the house is kind of not is substandard. And indeed, if you look at my house, because it was self-built as well, you wouldn't know what could come out of it. But that's what can come out of it. And the reason it's important, and the reason it's important to the Federal Reserve and to all of you, is that what it tells us is what's changing. We're well into the digital economy. We're well into the fourth industrial revolution. Indeed, economists are telling us that we were pushed 10 years forward into the fourth industrial revolution with COVID, because everybody had to transition at a much quicker rate, and we got to see the harsh disparities in access. So this shrinking middle class, increased digital skills, almost 90% of those middle skills jobs that used to be entry points into the middle class, they were manufacturing and retail. Now that has been overtaken by healthcare. And so this digital transformation that we're all having to go through, we're not preparing our population. What investing in the broadband infrastructure of our economy will do is unleash that. And I reveal some of that evidence about what it means to young people to have access, and then to be able to not have the brain drain here in the Valley where young people go away to start their businesses and innovations. They can start them right here because that's the foundation for the economy. The most important learning of the Colonia study was that there are huge assets here to invest in, huge human and social capital assets. We have assets such as VTX1, a co-op and broadband provider here, vast fiber assets that just need to be invested in to get to the communities, right? We have FAR, Texas, Dr. Ambrosio Hernandez, Cindy Garza, people from here that they became a municipal broadband provider. They could see what they needed to create. They're creating a student-run help desk. The students are going to be the experts in their community. They're going to get the paid jobs and internships and apprenticeships even to build these broadband networks that we're talking about, these billions of dollars. Let's prepare our young people to be out there. VTX1, likewise, is doing the same, creating apprenticeships and internships as well. And the city of Brownsville, likewise, did a public-private partnership model. They are using, and they were the people, along with the Colonia residents, that came together after the Colonia study and told the Federal Reserve, we want to do something about the digital divide. You could see in the Colonia study, it was like a couple of little paragraphs. I didn't understand it well enough. I had to learn with them what are the best practices. How do we really create an inclusive economy and invest in local companies and local governments. And it's totally bipartisan. It's about the innovation and bootstrapping of the people and taking on this understanding
Barton
of
Garcia,
the digital
I'm sorry, I got to
economy.
be a little bit disciplined on witness testimony here. So hopefully some of the members will have an opportunity to allow you to elaborate on that, but I need to claim back that time. And lastly, Ms. Kibby, you're now recognized for 5 minutes for a presentation of your testimony.
Good morning, Chairman Himes and committee members. My name is Susan Kibby. I'm the Executive Director of South Texans Property Rights Association based in Brooks County, one county north of this county. STEPRA, which I've condensed from South Texans Property Rights Association, was formed in 2006 because of border security experienced by landowners in a county that currently has the largest Border Patrol checkpoint in the nation. Over the years, we've focused on landowner liability from trespassing and law enforcement activities, property damage caused by trespassers, drive-thrus, and other smuggling-related damages. We've also invested countless hours building relationships with our local, state, and federal enforcement partners. We're strong advocates for law enforcement on every level, and in the absence of real solutions from the federal government, we support the efforts of the state of Texas to protect its citizens and their property during the current border crisis. So how were South Texas rural landowners affected by an unsecure border? Local emergency services are being diverted from local public safety needs of their communities to deal with smuggling pursuits, bailouts, and the lost, injured, and dehydrated or dead immigrants. The normal daily emergency needs don't just put themselves on hold until illegal immigration slows down. They just become needs that are unmet. Safety concerns. Many ranching and farming families moved into town because of personal safety concerns. Game cameras, which you'll see a picture in your folders, used on private properties have shown an increased number of smugglers carrying firearms and other weapons as they're guiding illegal immigrants and drugs through private property. Illegal immigrants who end up left behind and abandoned by their guide approach landowners or employees of the landowner, for direction or a ride to Houston or beyond. More and more of them are becoming more desperate and more threatening. What used to be an occasional event has now become commonplace. Migrants are breaking into homes, barns, and sheds for shelter, food, and other resources. Remember, some of these immigrants were criminals before they ever set foot on U.S. soil. Property damage. Every day there are high-speed pursuits, smuggling pursuits, drive-thrus, bailouts on private property. These incursions include damaged or destroyed gates, cut locks, damaged or destroyed fences, and other types of property damage. Crops on farmland are stomped on, driven through, and destroyed. Livestock end up on neighbors' places or on the highway. Grass and brush fires get set as diversions by cartel or by lost immigrants hoping to be found. Trash pickups can be a full-time job. Replacement costs associated with these damages can run into the hundreds and thousands of dollars. But the time taken away from the normal daily activities of the owners and their employees is near impossible to estimate, as it seems to be a part of every hour of every day. And this affects agriculture in a big way. Now let's get personal. I actually had some blown up posters. Those will be taken pictures of and put in your in the public record. But I'm going to share two examples of two different landowners. One, a member 35 miles from the U.S. border. The other, my place, 80 miles away from the border, in my own experience. So in April, 200 yards from the landowner's front gate, from the incursion, 6 illegal immigrants were apprehended. There was $500 worth of damage. One of the smuggled women had to be taken by ambulance to the hospital for an injured arm. And based on DHS estimates, at least one of the young women in that group had been sexually assaulted. Jim Wells County, 2 counties from here, May 9th of this year, the smuggling pursuit caused a destroyed gate, damaged fence, damage to a shed, and the replacement costs and labor went into the hundreds of dollars. 15 illegal immigrants were apprehended, 4 of whom were piled into a toolbox, the other piled into the back seat of a pickup. Even if our South Texas landowners could somehow weather the storm we find ourselves in, the map that will also be entered into the record shows that the sections of controlled by the cartel in Mexico and now into the U.S. If or when Title 42 comes to an end, or in the current climate, we could be facing hundreds more hardened criminals pouring into the country. Based on DHS's own estimates, 1% to 3% of border crossers are criminal aliens. You can bet that these guys won't be turning themselves in and waiting for a bus ticket north. I appreciate the invitation to testify and taking the time to listen to our concerns. We look forward to working with this committee to develop effective solutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kibby. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes of questions. Commissioner Fuentes, I learned a lot from you this morning about water. What we didn't hear enough about was, as a non-expert, what I assume is the effects of flooding and the actual impact it has on people's health, on people's property. Let me give you a minute or two. Again, as a non-expert, I assume that if you have a lot of standing water around, you've got mosquito issues, you potentially have disease, lots of property destruction. So let me just give you a couple minutes to put a fine point and to paint a picture about why what you do is so important to the basic foundation of the people who live here.
Thank you, Chairman. In the flood events of 2018, 19, and Hurricane Hannah in 20, thankfully we didn't lose any lives. So we were very blessed and fortunate in that way. But however, thousands of homes got damaged. In 2018, there was one neighborhood by itself that had 325 homes with water intrusion. In order to qualify under FEMA assistance, you have to have 18 inches of water standing in your house. So people that had 2, 3, 4 inches of rain still had to rebuild their homes, tear out sheetrock, what they call muck and gut. They had to redo their entire homes and didn't qualify for any FEMA assistance. So situations like that, when you already have an economically distressed area and having them try to input money into their homes and rebuild with only the threat of another flood coming somewhere down in the near future is very disheartening. A lot of the programs require that you meet a certain threshold, and then there are a lot of people that are just afraid to go ask for the help and not knowing exactly what it's all about. With respect to mosquitoes and safety, obviously we have a lot of septic systems out in the rural area, and when water obviously penetrates those types of systems, all of that comes out into the rainwater. So we do have a lot of safety issues with respect to our kids. We have a lot of brush and other safety issues, mosquitoes that pass along viruses and disease. So we try to mitigate that as much as we can with our programs, vector control, water pumping, anything that we can do to get water extraction done, but nothing does the job better than gravity flow.
So thank you, Commissioner. I want to give you a minute too. You put forward a statistic that was pretty startling, which is that the state of Texas received $4.2 billion associated with the flooding event a number of years ago. Despite getting 3 emergency declarations, Hidalgo County only, I think you said $25 million. What accounted for that lack of funds going to, as you say, economically distressed communities, and how can that be changed if it was inequitable?
I wish that I could tell you what the reasonable answer is. All I know is that from the standpoint of even in the 2018 disaster recovery funds that are available right now, Hidalgo County was declared one of the disaster areas. We received $17 million for the 34 inches of rain that we received in 2018. And that is with a maximum award of $1 million per entity. I don't know what kind of drainage infrastructure is going to be effective at a cost of $1 million once you add in the engineering required, the administration to do those things. So I can't answer the disparity between the amount of awards. All I know is that we did not receive our fair share.
Okay, let me turn to Ms. Barton Garcia. My Republican friends up here are not big fans of the American Recovery Plan, but it allocated $65 billion, a very substantial amount of money for broadband. It's reasonable to suppose that Texas will get hundreds of millions of dollars to address the challenges that you have been outlining here today. Again, paint a little bit more of a specific picture about what those funds will do for people in this community.
Yes. Thank you. It is a great opportunity, and communities are coming together to try to make their plans and use those funds very wisely. I think what it'll do, digital inclusion is economic inclusion. So by having broadband networks, you'll be supporting entrepreneurship, workforce opportunities, some that I spoke about, hands-on experiential learning for young people in the assets of the digital economy. And you'll be creating an environment, right, for entrepreneurship. So a lot of the young people that go away currently, we call it the brain drain, right, to start their business, like a young woman from the Las Milpas colonia and FAR, went away and started her business in Silicon Valley. It's a telehealth business, but she could run it here, but we just don't have the broadband infrastructure to be able to have those kinds of businesses. So the very foundation for what businesses are now, with a little code and a computer, you can create an Amazon and a Google. That is very awesome. It's an awesome opportunity, but if you don't have that connectivity, you're less likely to be able to start the business here and create those jobs and opportunities here. So I think what it'll do is transform this economy. And especially if we invest in the very assets that already exist to expand, just like with housing and other things, some of the most innovative things are happening here. It's just that they're not getting the investment to take it to scale, to reach everybody. So, and that's really an inclusive economy that we try to create in community development.
Thank you very much for that answer, and I recognize the ranking member for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Kibby, thank you for being here. I spoke about how the unsecured border is impacting all Americans. We talked about its impact as it relates to the drug trafficking, human trafficking. We see it affect our entire nation as it relates to individuals coming across who are on the border, who are on the terror watch list. CBP just released their numbers for May. 15 individuals on the border, on the terror watch list, were encountered last month. 50 so far this fiscal year, a huge spike. The word is out across the world that the United States of America's borders are open and unsecured. But we're here in South Texas. I think we have a unique opportunity here directly on the personal side, how this is impacting people here. And that's one of the things that I get questions about back home, where people say, I've never been to the U.S.-Mexico border. What's it like? What do you see on your property, on your ranch, friends and neighbors? How is the unsecured border directly impacting you and your neighbors?
Well, just last night, I had to text my neighbor at about 10:30, 11 at night to let them know, after learning from law enforcement, that a smuggler had a stolen vehicle that was heading south to smuggle north, had driven through their gate in their fence, and that was the second time in the past 2 weeks. This is a constant occurrence. These are high-speed chases on back roads. There's a feeling of unsafety, of never knowing what's going to happen, of having a helicopter hover over you looking for illegal immigrants. It's unsettling, and it's just not right.
You use the term, you have a feeling of unsafety, and I'm thinking about you and others, but in particular, I'm thinking about kids who want to be outside, playing in their yard. And I think it's important that everybody has a right to feel safe, absolutely everybody. Do you feel safe? Do you feel safe to have your kids outside? Your neighbors feel safe to have their kids outside?
I think they're very cautious and always wanting them to know their surroundings and watching the time of day. But as I stated in my testimony, many have moved into town where they feel more safe because the rural areas, the smugglers, the scouts, the coyotes, they know the back roads. They scout them all the time. They know the roads better in some cases. I'm not saying better than law enforcement, because unfortunately law enforcement are on these back roads now constantly. That has changed. It's just not knowing who's driving down the road, or in some cases who's driving up to your house.
So you've shared that people have been making decisions to move to different locations so they can feel safer. Yeah. How has this also impacted kind of jobs and businesses in this community? In particular, the ability of ranches to be able to engage in agriculture? Well,
just know that in addition to farming and ranching, at South Texas, hunting is very well known and very famous. The quail country, white-tailed deer. When you have large groups walking through during hunting season, scaring off the game, and unfortunately, during these times, too, is when the skeletal remains of dead illegal immigrants are found. And so that's unsettling. You have lessees that are no longer interested in leasing land, so that hits the bottom pocket as well, as I stated. And we can get into this at some point, too, on H-2A visas for ag workers. You know, farming is now being sourced to Mexico. Can't get, you know, the ag labor that's needed.
Understood. Let me, cognizant of the time.
Yes, sir.
And it's so unique. I believe this is the first bipartisan full committee hearing held at the border in a number of years. And many of our colleagues have not had the opportunity or have chosen to not come to the United States-Mexico border. And if there was one thing you wanted us to hear, to bring back to our colleagues in Washington and decision makers in Washington, many of whom have not been here to see this firsthand, what would it be?
That the agriculture community, the ranchers and farmers, and those that make a living on the land feel totally abandoned by this federal government. We've reached out. There have been multiple Republican congressional and senatorial delegations that have come down, but no Democratic delegations that have come down and even asked to speak to a landowner.
Well, I think that changes today, but I will tell you, I'm very concerned about the unsecured U.S.-Mexico border, and I hope we can take this message back to our colleagues and decision makers in Washington. Thank you very much.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Mr. Gonzalez.
Thank you so much, and I'm going to try to hopefully get us back on the economic and infrastructure disparity. I want to talk, which is why we're here, in the seventh safest community in the country. But I want to talk to Commissioner Garza because we passed the American Rescue Plan in a nonpartisan way. Unfortunately, it was one side that passed it because we knew of the resources that communities like ours needed. And I had the opportunity to go to the water treatment plant that you funded with those funds, people that were getting yellow water out of their faucets and drinking water, and it was tragic. And thankfully, because of the American Rescue Plan, people have cleaner water to shower, cleaner water to drink. I want you to tell me a little bit about how that changed that community and what more we can do, Mr. Garza.
Thank you very much. That opportunity for us as Cameron County to help the municipality provide safe drinking water, interestingly enough, as I told him, I'm serviced by that same municipality, which is 2 miles, I live 2 miles from the border wall where I live. And this municipality straddles the river, water service municipality. They have to use brackish water to be able to clean so that they can provide the source because of how close they are to the Gulf of Mexico. So it becomes really challenging. Many of the households are very economically distressed in that area. Just as you visited colonias today, we have colonias in many areas along the river area. And those folks need help. It's hard to raise money from them under water rates to be able to do the major multi-million-dollar improvements that are required. And we were able to provide some funding on more than one occasion and are looking to do about 3 other projects.
With the same American Rescue?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Can you tell us about those projects?
Yeah, those projects, you know, interestingly enough, one of the projects involves capacity building for further improvements and development in our county in an area that is not served by the utilities. And that project will expand the ability to be able to grow neighborhoods that are middle-class neighborhoods that all of us would be proud to live in because of the availability of water and, you know, sewer systems. So we are looking forward, and we're meeting with those folks probably weekly now to make an investment with them to help us twofold. One, improve our economic base with that new area being developed, and 2, to provide a better quality of life if it's developed in the wrong way and we end up with more underserved areas that you witnessed today.
Thank you. And if I remember correctly, before y'all had this investment that came from the American Rescue Plan, there was actually yellow water coming out of their faucets. Was that correct?
That is correct. I can attest to that and show you pictures at my home. You
Right.
know, after 2 different filtration systems that luckily I could afford, many of these folks can't, it's still yellow in your sink. And I would call the general manager and say, hey, are you going to pay my cleaning bill this month, you know, for taking my clothes to the cleaners because I can't, even doing laundry, simple things such as that impact everyday life for folks in our area. So
I'm really proud to have voted for that bill and assured that Americans like us here in South Texas and in regions across the country that live in similar conditions had access to resources to improve their lives on just basic living conditions. When you have third world country living, Americans living under third world living conditions, these investments make such a huge impact. So thank you for being here. And I know I'm running out of time, but I guess I'll pass. We got 56 seconds. Okay. I just want to talk briefly. I know you've worked heavily on the interstate connectivity, which we lack. We're the largest urban community in the United States that's not connected to a major interstate highway, which impacts manufacturing jobs and just other multinational corporations from wanting to come to our area. What can we do to expedite to make things better, and how does that impact our local economy, our health, education, commerce, and everything else?
there's been many great opportunities that have been brought forth recently with some of the legislation that has passed. Unfortunately, the criterion for competitive grants has been geared to one size fits all. That is not the case. It is impossible for us to compete with communities that have been on interstate systems 50, 60 years and are congested and have large populations, when the basic criteria to be able to qualify for this money is population and traffic studies. Well, it's hard to build traffic when you don't have infrastructure. It's hard to build human capital when you don't have the ability to move those products. And I think I testified before you all on video some months ago, and I'm doing it in person today, but that is when the Super Bowl was going to come on. And I think I said, guys, be careful because avocados aren't coming across in the far bridge. Super Bowl Sunday, people are going to run out of avocados and guacamole.
Right.
And it turned out to be true because our governor in the state had, done a secondary inspection on trailers coming across and delayed the delivery.
Right.
But since then has been corrected and things are flowing
Billions of
again.
dollars. Thank you so much. I look forward to continue working with you to assure that our citizens have standard housing, clean water to drink and shower, and just the basic American standard. Thank you.
Mr. Harrington. Somebody said it's hot here in South Texas. I said I'd rather be hot in South Texas than comfortable in Washington, D.C. God bless Texas. Welcome to God's country, Chairman. Thank y'all for letting us have this hearing here. Thank you for your leadership and your service, your love for your community, and your love for your country. Let me make some comments. First, I want you to know this is a friend, and I love him as a fellow Texan. But I disagree with a whole lot about what he has supported and voted on and what my chairman has for this committee. And quite frankly, most of the party under Pelosi's leadership, and certainly this president. I'm just going to be shooting straight with you because that's what we do in Texas, right? Okay, so the American Rescue Plan, maybe it did help somebody somewhere, I'm sure, because when you pass $2 trillion, it better help somebody somewhere. But 10 cents out of every dollar went to some COVID-related issue, and it was wrapped in the flag of helping us get back from COVID. We spent $100 billion to bail out the union pensions. Nobody sold it as that. We had tens of billions for schools that never opened their doors to our children. That's a moral hazard. That's rewarding bad behavior. That was in the bill. Nobody's going to tell you about that. Tens of billions of dollars to stimulus checks to people making $150,000 and didn't miss a paycheck. Not a good use of your tax dollars. Don't you agree? Okay. I could go on and on, like bailing out California, who is now cash flush with $98 billion thanks to the hardworking people of South Texas. So, no, I don't think that was a good bill. I don't think it was good for you. I don't think it was good for your children. They're going to have to crawl out of a $30 trillion debt hole if they can, if this whole ship doesn't sink under the weight of this frivolous, reckless spending. And oh, by the way, how do you like the $460 a month that you've lost in your wages because of the fire of inflation? The match that lit it was this public federal spending flooding the market. Okay? And it's true. We had $1 trillion left to spend, hadn't even been spent, and it was solely Democrats that jammed that through. It wasn't one Republican because of the things I mentioned. Did it help somebody? Gosh, I hope it did, because it hurt our country, and it's hurting working people more than anybody else. Now, I'd like to talk about the infrastructure stuff. I agree with the broadband. We need to not leave communities behind. I'm a rural guy, food, fuel, and fiber capital of the world up there in Lubbock. And you guys, man, we are very simpatico when it comes to what drives our local economy. We feed and clothe the world. We fuel the nation's economy. But there's an awfully big whole of government assault on oil and gas. You would think we were the enemy of the state. We keep consumer prices low. We give America energy independence. There is a full-on assault. So when you talk about infrastructure, 25 cents on every dollar of the $1 trillion infrastructure bill went to real infrastructure, waterways, roads, bridges. I don't know that 500 electric charging stations helped South Texas. No, I was against that too. The infrastructure that matters most right now is the infrastructure that protects the American people. And we are at ground zero of the worst humanitarian, public safety, and security crisis in the history of our country. And we're talking about roads and bridges. I'd love to have the conversation, but that would be like us going to Ukraine and having a hearing about fixing the potholes in the street while the Russians are waging war on their citizens. So no, we got to talk about this border crisis. It is 100,000 people have died from drug overdoses. That's more than the Vietnam War, Gulf War, Iraq War, Afghanistan War combined. Generations of Americans are dying because of a war declared on our country by the drug cartels. If I asked you, raise your hand if you think the federal government's in control of our border. Raise your hand. Raise your hand if you think the drug cartels are in operational control of our border. Y'all don't think that? I'll make note of that. I'll tell the president, since he won't come down here, none of y'all think that the drug cartels are in operational control of the border. Do you, Ms. Kibby?
Kibby, and yes, sir, I do.
Well, I don't have a whole lot of time left, but the chaos and lawlessness is unacceptable for your children, for the neighborhoods of South Texas and the neighborhoods in West Texas. And I hope we can spend more time. I know Ms. Kamala Harris hadn't come here. She went to Central Texas, said it's the environment, it's the climate. Well, I don't think any one of you guys agree with that. You know policies have consequences. This is self-inflicted. We've got to do something about it, not just to save Texas, save America. So I appreciate your indulgence. I know I went off script there, but I'm a Texan, so occasionally we go off script. God bless Texas. I yield back.
Ms. Jacobs.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all of my colleagues who are here and have such strong feelings about what's happening on our southern border. I actually represent part of our southern border in San Diego, and I can tell you for sure that Title 42 has been a boon to the cartels and the smugglers at the border. And Ms. Kibby, I'm really sorry to hear about the impacts here in Texas that are a result of us in Congress failing to pass a comprehensive approach to immigration reform so that we can have a safe, orderly, and humane implementation of immigration law at the border. And I hope to work with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to be able to get that done so that we can deliver for families all across America. Ms. Barton Garcia, I wanted to talk about your Federal Reserve report about children in South Texas. I was surprised by the data in your report that has projected a lifespan that is a few years shorter for children in South Texas than that of their parents. And I think one of the things that I was struck with today was how the fact that we have failed to invest in the colonias, in a series of state laws and state approaches to the area that have made it hard to have the investments needed, really perpetuates this inequality from generation to generation. So I was hoping you could talk a little bit about what you would attribute this to and what more can be done in South Texas or the colonias from us in the federal government to improve children's health outcomes, and what kind of federal support you would need for that.
Yeah, I think with regard to health outcomes, one of the things that I recommend is that we be able to use the tools of telehealth and to include anchor institutions, hospital systems in our broadband plans and community health centers, so that we can use the very advances in medicine. One of the reasons we have the highest cost of care in the country, in the valleys, because a lot of people go to emergency rooms for primary care, and that's the highest cost of care, as well as getting acute conditions because of not having preventative care. So being able to invest in our hospital systems, our federally qualified community health centers, vital. But what we found when I interviewed them during the pandemic, they couldn't, when Governor Abbott said transition to telehealth so that you can serve the people, they couldn't reach the people, right? We might have moved quickly to get them the infrastructure they needed internally, but not very many of them had that internally. But also they couldn't reach people. So we need the tools of the digital economy. That's why we're seeing, healthcare is the biggest creator of jobs in this region. It's one of the biggest, and certainly around Texas. It's so important, but we need to make sure we have the tools to provide healthcare in an efficient way and the most effective way.
Well, thank you. And I was hoping you could talk a little more also about the social determinants of health, like food and housing and some of the environmental challenges that we've heard about here today, and how this question of health equity and economic inequality are linked, and why investing in these children's health outcomes will be important for addressing economic disparity and fairness and growth.
So what we have realized is that health outcomes are not just access to care. It has to do with where you live, right? Your housing, your environment, what's available, broadband. Certainly we saw it real blatantly during the pandemic, right? Whether or not you had broadband determined whether or not you were able to socially distance and so forth, or whether we could care for our elder parents, right, effectively. So that investment is very critical to achieving health equity. It's not everything, right? But the major hospital systems, we have some of the best in the world, right? They can be anchors on these broadband networks, and they will benefit because they'll have efficiency, they'll have more business. We expanded telehealth, so that's going to be very important. Mental health is a crisis everywhere in the country, certainly in South Texas. We have now the UTRGV School of Medicine investing in that. Amazing. It's going to be able to attract providers, the dearth of providers. And then creating upward mobility, that's what the social determinants are about, right? Is that maybe a percentage, 20% is access to care and quality of care, but the rest of health outcomes is all of these other conditions. So looking at things holistically and knowing, and broadband is one of those intersecting issues, right? We call it now a super social determinant of health, because it impacts so many areas of the social determinants of health. So,
well, thank you. And Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And first want to say thank you for the witnesses for being here today. My colleagues and I this morning took a tour of some of the colonias, as well as had some great discussions with all of you, and it was enlightening for sure. But I want to start by saying that the colonias are not unique. I live in part of the Oklahoma City metro area where you have many communities that look very similar. 45 minutes away from where I live, you will see communities that are low income, challenged with infrastructure issues, particularly water issues. And so I have an understanding of the challenges that you're facing. Some of them are self-inflicted, candidly. When we talked about tax revenue ad valorem, some of these things I think were perpetuated from not actually regulating those areas until the last few years, and that's become, I think, more and more of a problem over time. I want to maybe address something that my friend and colleague from California mentioned, and that is talking about immigration reform. I think that everyone at this table here wants to have that conversation, but before we have that conversation, you have to secure the border, first and foremost. That's the priority here, and here's why. If you look at the total amount of funding that the state of Texas has spent on Operation Lone Star to try to secure the border, and this is Texas taxpayers, your taxpayer dollars that are going to secure the border, $2 billion is estimated. To give you just one example, the state legislature 2 months ago approved the transfer of $495 million for these operations. Commissioner, you and I were talking earlier, and you said that to address the flooding challenges that your community is facing, you probably need $500 million, right? This is it. If we can secure the border, then the state of Texas is going to have plenty of more funding to be able to invest in infrastructure and water treatment facilities in your communities. But without addressing the root cause, the money is going to other things. You had Texas National Guard having money taken. You have your health communities that are being impacted because of the resources that are being drawn out of that. These are the challenges I think that I see that we have to try to talk about. When we talk about broadband, Ms. Barton Garcia, I think you are 100% correct. Again, I saw these challenges in Oklahoma with the pandemic, but I also want to recognize that there are different ways to address broadband. It is not laying fiber, which is expensive and isn't always the best option. There are new satellite technologies that are being introduced all over the U.S. that provide us the ability to connect fast, effective, high-speed internet to our communities. And I want to make sure that we're looking at those alternative options because they can be very effective. The last thing I want to say is actually to Ms. Kibby. I want to thank you for being with us today, and I want to thank the South Texas Property Rights Association for supporting the bill that I drafted, the Safe Border Act. Can you talk a little bit about the severity of the situation, and also how is the lack of control impacting the communities?
Well, it's actually taking away from the communities for emergency care, law enforcement, firefighters, all of that. Like, for instance, in Brooks County, one county north of here, the bulk of their monies are going to manage illegal immigration. And like I said, if you have a heart attack, too bad, better not die, because you might not get an ambulance in the time you need it because they're out. I think it impacts us all more than we really know. We're used to living, and we've gotten used to living this day-to-day life, and that's not normal, and we shouldn't be where we are today.
I have a few seconds left. I think I want to throw this to anyone on the panel here, and that is, how do you see the impact of immigration in the South Texas region impacting the economic expansion and viability of your communities? We talked a little bit about the fact that education is the #1 industry here. How does the immigration issue impact workforce?
I'll give it a quick shot, and I'll try to be as bipartisan as I possibly can. Since 1986, United States Congress and administrations, both Democrat and Republican, have refused to address comprehensive immigration reform. I guarantee you that if we were to sit down on a case-by-case or issue-by-issue basis with both Democratic congressmen and women and Republican, I guarantee you, Congressman Arrington, that we would agree on probably 80% of the issues. It is a little disheartening that we have a difference of opinion with regards to this. I was born and raised in Brownsville, lived there my entire life. I know, and I've heard the complaints that Ms. Kibby has raised with regards to the rural areas, which are north of us. But for the RGV, okay, and the
Judge, I apologize. My time has expired.
I'll try to finish it up. 1.5 million people live in the valley, And immigration reform, we've had the inability to have an ample labor pool. We have a dropping birth rate in this entire country. We've got to come up with a comprehensive plan, bipartisan, in order to address, and I guarantee you, some of these issues that are being raised with regards to the unstable or insecurity of the border, which we will respectfully disagree on.
230,000 last month, and you disagree, but that's a 400% increase from April.
That minute is now expired, so we're going to go on to Ms. Cameron.
All right. Well, thank you so much to Chairman Himes and all my colleagues and all our witnesses here today. It is such an important issue, and of course I'm thrilled that this is the first congressional hearing that we have had bipartisanly at the border. Commissioner Fuentes, before I get into it, I do want to say, as the ranking member of the Homeland Security Committee on FEMA, as the ranking member, I will personally take your project worksheets to Administrator Criswell and ask for a response as to why there was such a disparity. Now, this is my 5th trip to the border and to this community, and I have to say that every time I come here, I fall more in love with the community and the people. I genuinely love this community. But as we sit here, I want to make mention that about 3.5 miles, actually 3.5 miles exactly, away from here, 11 minutes, is the Donna processing facility. Currently, today, as we sit here in this air-conditioned room, there are 1,705 children under the age of 18 there. In total, there are 2,586 people at Donna today. That does not include Ursula, but if you do include the numbers, there are 3,992 individuals in both Donna and the Ursula processing facility. That is just today. That will change tomorrow, and there will be more. Now, I want to talk about what happens to those 1,705 kids. They will be processed. Then they will try to determine if there is a relative somewhere in the United States. And if they can't, then they go into HHS custody. So a number of NGOs will tap into a unique fund at this point, a FEMA program called the Emergency Food and Shelter Program. It's a program that covers shelter, food, and supportive services to individuals and families who are experiencing or at risk of experiencing hunger or homelessness. They put an emphasis on veterans and single mothers from underserved community. I would say that our community here fits that description. So here's what's interesting. In the last 2 years, $260 million from that FEMA program has not gone to those underserved communities or our veterans or our single mothers who are facing homelessness. It has gone to the illegal migrants who are crossing here to house and feed them and transport them to communities around the country. Now, Commissioner Fuentes, you highlighted FEMA's lack of a footprint here and the communities that aren't eligible for FEMA funding in natural disasters that are declared major or presidential. You highlighted the Army Corps of Engineers only allocates 33 cents for every $100. Now, we have a saying in North Florida that I think is appropriate here. That would make me madder than a tapeworm in a tomato patch, okay? I know. We're all Southern. Now, I say that because it has to be infuriating to everyone here, particularly you as an elected official, that FEMA has spent $260 million here in South Texas, but not for our citizens, not for our veterans, not for our underserved mothers and fathers, not for our underserved communities, but because of the border crisis. And it's not going to the constituents that you represent. It also must infuriate you that the Democratic majority in Congress and this administration are expanding the Army Corps of Engineers programs like WOTUS, the Waters of the U.S., which would make any property, quote, seasonably wet, subject to the Army Corps of Engineers. Good luck with getting any funding for economic development when it is subject to the Army Corps of Engineers authority. Now, Judge Treviño, you mentioned economic development. Ms. Barton Garcia, you highlighted broadband investments and the importance of connectivity. As someone who comes from a rural Florida district with similar connectivity issues, I think I can say with certainty that not just myself, but every single person on this committee believes and agrees that it is critical to have access to high-speed, reliable, and affordable internet. But you cannot deny the fact that when you have dozens of people on the international terrorist watch list crossing in your backyard, and you have 2.75 million illegal migrant encounters in 18 months, quite literally in your backyard, that makes economic development difficult. So today I have 3 of my sheriffs from Florida with me, along with several deputies, and they're here because the open border policies of this administration have turned every town in America into a border town. Specifically in my community, my district, I have seen firsthand bricks of fentanyl weighing 2 pounds each with a border stamp on them from a Gulf cartel member in my district. These are killing our people across the country. Now, this was confirmed by Homeland Security investigations that those bricks of fentanyl in my district came from this area. And since it was mentioned by my colleague, Representative Gonzalez, which I love your district, it's beautiful. This is the second safest city in America? Seventh. So I find it curious that it's not every day that your hometown you have people on the International Terrorist Watch List crossing in your community and it's deemed safe. But I want to put this in perspective. One of my county sheriffs from Flagler County, Rick Staley, they have 45 detectives, right? Here in Homeland Security investigations, they have 34 investigators. One county has more detectives investigating the fentanyl and the drugs and the crime compared to an entire sector here in South Texas. I'm just going to ask yes or no to each of you. Do you believe that we have a border crisis, yes or no? I appreciate it. This is my last question. It's my one question. Yes or no, down the line to each of our witnesses, do you believe that we have a border crisis? I'll start with you, Judge Treviño.
There's an immigration crisis.
Just yes or no?
There's an immigration crisis.
It is not a border crisis?
Depends on your perspective, ma'am.
Okay, 2.7 million people coming in okay, all right.
If the end goal is to have
I'm not
zero-
interested in
well,
playing
now
politics. I'm here for the facts.
That's what we're
Commissioner
talking about.
Fuentes.
The gentlelady's time has expired. Mr. Donald is ready.
I'm going to yield the gentlelady 30 seconds.
Thank you to my good friend and colleague from the great state of Florida, the Sunshine State. Commissioner Fuentes, do you believe that we have a border crisis?
I don't have enough information to make a decision like that. I'm sorry.
I'm sure your constituents will appreciate that. Commissioner Garza.
Is there a border crisis in regards to human trafficking? Is there a border crisis in regards
Just
to
yes or
drugs?
no?
Well, no.
Okay, Ms. Barton Garcia.
Yes, we have an underinvestment in the border. Instead of the antiquated walls like the Great Wall of China.
Okay,
we
so
could
yes,
have broadband.
Ms. Kibby.
Yes, ma'am, there is.
Thank you. I appreciate it, and I yield back.
Mr. Chairman, thanks so much for the rest of the time. The witnesses, thanks for being here. I mean, look, ladies and gentlemen, if you've never seen a congressional hearing, welcome. They tend to look like this. Look, I think the one issue that I've seen, and I was talking with my colleague, Ms. Bice of Oklahoma, the big problem we have in Washington is Washington doesn't know how to walk and chew gum at the same time. We acknowledge, even just being here for a few hours this morning, that you guys have some serious infrastructure issues that have been neglected for a myriad of reasons. Some local, let's acknowledge and be factual, some local prior administrations, some state prior administrations, definitely federal prior and current administrations. Let's just be honest. Number two, we have to acknowledge that yes, 3.5 miles south, we have a serious issue with border security in the United States. And the number one reason we have that issue is because the President of the United States has taken away the authority from Border Patrol to make a determination of credible fear with respect to asylum applications at the border. That was completely a policy change by the President of the United States on January 21, 2021. That's the only reason this is happening. It is a policy decision. If you want to take a look at the issues facing your community with respect to resources, I actually have somewhat of a list of some of the funding that went into the American Rescue Plan, something that has been touted for a lot of positive things like taking care of the water issues, Commissioner Garza, that were happening in your area. But here's some of the other things that they did. Actually, my fault, this is the infrastructure bill, not ARP. ARP actually brought us a ton of inflation, so I know there was broadband money in the American Rescue Plan, but now the dollars that were appropriated actually they don't go as far because the inflation created by the American Rescue Plan has actually driven up the cost of broadband deployment. So the component pieces you need for your broadband cost more today because of the inflation unleashed by the same bill that my colleagues say did so much for the American economy. I think everybody who basically put gas in their car this morning, yesterday, or the day before know that actually not to be the case, not to discount the food. But going back to infrastructure. In the infrastructure bill, the bipartisan infrastructure bill where there were members of the Senate and House were on the Republican side, $66 billion went to Amtrak. Folks, we have been funding money into Amtrak for decades in Washington, D.C. And the reason why Amtrak continuously needs money is because people don't ride Amtrak the way they used to ride Amtrak, because they fly or they drive. They don't use the system. Washington continues to fund the system. Commissioner Fuentes, funding for Amtrak ain't helping you. When the infrastructure bill was created in the Budget Committee, the one thing that we always asked for was, is there an Excel spreadsheet of all the critical projects across the United States that if we're going to spend $1.2 trillion to fund infrastructure, we should at least have a listing of what the projects are for? Nobody ever gave a list. What the administration did is they said we're going to spend this amount of money in these areas, and they created funding formulas. But the problem with these funding formulas is that your community continues to run up against the same bureaucratic, big bucket, one-size-fits-all approaches of how dollars are disseminated, as opposed to members of Congress and the administration going community by community and identifying the critical need projects in those communities. You see, folks, I can talk about the border and your funding issues at the same time. As members of Congress, we should have the ability to do both and acknowledge the realities that bureaucratic grant programs have not just failed the Rio Grande Valley. They failed most underserved communities all through the United States. And the underserved communities that typically still continue to get funding are the ones that are in massive urban corridors like my former home city of New York City. New York gets money all the time. So I think when we come away from this, it's important for the members to understand that to address your list of concerns, we have to take budget authority and appropriating authority back from the administration. And this is bipartisan now. I don't care what administration we're talking about. We can no longer, as members of Congress, turn a blind eye and just sign over checks to the administrative state for them to then tell our leaders in all of our communities all across the country, oh, well, you don't qualify because you can't check this box. Oh, well, you need more money in order to do this. Commissioner Fuentes, Commissioner Garza, am I right in what I'm saying?
I appreciate what you're saying, because a lot of times you were saying that the money from the state that is in Operation Lone Star can be allocated here. But we don't have any control over that budget. So anything that you can do to help create that infrastructure budget for us, all we know is that there are needs, and we're busy here trying to identify those needs. I'd be happy to give you a list of about $2 billion that will help you find a way to use that money.
I saw a list right here. I got that list.
Yeah, I've got a $2 billion list also for Cameron County. It would propel us in the next 20 years to be the next Dallas-Fort Worth of Texas. Okay?
The gentleman's time is expired. I'd like to thank, I wish we could do more of this, but a number of us have flights to catch, but I really profoundly want to thank the community. You've really given us your officials, your leaders, and all to engage with us, and I really want to thank you for doing that. Without objection, all members will have 10 legislative days within which to submit extraneous materials to the chair for inclusion in the record. I remind members that written questions and materials for the record should be submitted to the email address provided to your offices. Again, I thank our witnesses and all the members of the community who have hosted us here today. This hearing is adjourned.